Hi everyone, thank you so much for stopping by today. Today I'm going to walk you through what you need to start milling your own grain at home. I'll talk to you about the 3 essentials, and then I'll throw in some extras that I have just found made the process a lot easier and more enjoyable. I hope you find it helpful. The first of the 3 essential items would be the grain mill. There are a lot on the market today, and it can get overwhelming to pick the right one. So I'm just going to walk you through 2 different ones, and hopefully that will help you make a choice going forward that suits your needs. I have the Mockmill 100, which mills by way of stone burr. In a stone burr, there are 2 stones, usually made of granite or in my case, ceramic. These 2 stones rotate against each other. As the wheat berries are filtered through, they scissor the grains, and as they go out to the outer sides, they get scissored again and again, and then eventually propelled out of the front, or the chute, I guess you could call it. The gap between those 2 stones can vary, which is really nice because it gives you the variety. I can do either a really fine flour all the way to a cracked grain. You can see the dial on the side that can be rotated. I find the versatility of that really nice. A stone burr can also grind beans and any kind of dry fibrous material, so spices could be ground in here. I obviously have the Mockmill, but there's also the Como and the Nutrimill Harvest, and they are really wonderful. A stone burr also has a smaller footprint than the other type of mill that I'm going to be talking to you about, so that's something to be considerate of, and just think about what kind of space you have in your kitchen, whether this is going to be stored under a cabinet or in a cabinet or a pantry. So something to think about when purchasing a mill. The second popular type of a grain mill is an impact grain mill. In an impact grain mill, there are stainless steel concentric rings and that have fins in them. These concentric rings spin at tens of thousands of revolutions per minute. As the wheat goes into it, they are impacted and burst open into a fine flour. So impact mills, they only produce a fine flour to somewhat of a coarser flour, so there's a lot less versatility in it. They cannot do dry fibrous material such as spices, so it's basically a fine flour to a bit of a coarser flour. They are a little bit bigger of a footprint than a stone burr mill, but they also give you a really good fine flour. So it's just another thing to take in consideration, what kind of types of breads or baking items that you are doing in your kitchen and what fits your needs. Do you like the versatility of it? Or are you fine with kind of just a simple fine flour? Do you have space for an impact mill? So all of those things are really good things to think about when purchasing a mill. With an impact mill, there's the Nutrimill Classic or the Wonder Mill that I would highly recommend. I think both are really great and a very good option to start this journey. Okay, so the next thing is the grain. You obviously can't do any of this without the grain. So I'm gonna show you how I store my grain. I have them in these food grade buckets. Something I would highly recommend to get if you're going to store your grains in these buckets is something called a gamma lid. They're very easy. They just spin off. They make it really accessible to get in and use your grain. They seal really well and keep it fresh. Finding the right kind of grain can be really overwhelming because there are a lot of choices, there's a lot of type of grains. Here's what I would say when you're doing your research on grains. When you're starting out, you really only need a hard wheat, and if you're doing a lot of soft baked items such as muffins, cakes, cookies, a soft wheat would be a really good option. However, all of those things can be made with a hard wheat. So you'll notice that there are often grains called a hard red, a hard white, a winter wheat, a spring wheat. So those are basically grains that you will use with yeasted products. So think like sandwich bread, artisan loaves, French bread, things like that. Those are all something that you want a rise on. And the hard wheat is what can create the gluten structure and create that high rise. I have bought my grain from Azure Standard for a very long time, many, many years. And I've been really happy with them, happy with the price, the quality. the amount that I can get. It's all been wonderful. So I will link Azure Standard in the description box below so that you can check it out if you're interested. Another really great brand is the 4 Generations Organic Farms. They have really great options for really good quality grain. Going back to the types of grain, I would look for a hard wheat and possibly a soft wheat and start there. And then once you get really good at those, you can go into some of the ancient grains. So that would be a kamut or spelt or einkorn, barley. There's so many different ancient grains that are really fun and add a lot of flavor to our breads. They're just a little bit different and harder to work with. Well, I don't know if I would say harder to work with, but just different. Maybe require a little bit more of a learning curve. And so starting out, I would definitely just do a hard wheat and a soft wheat. And once you get really good at that, you're gonna be really excited to try some of the different ones. And I'll bring you along on different videos and show you some of the ancient grains and how I incorporate them into some of our loaves of bread or some of our cookies or whatever it is. There's so many ways and so many things that you can incorporate them. So once you have your grain, find a good way to store them. If they are stored correctly, they last a really long time. So correctly, I mean, they're sealed, they are stored in a dark, cool place. I have a bunch of different grains and I keep them all in these food grade plastic buckets with these gamma lids, and they have kept for a really long time, and I have not had any issues with bugs or grains going rancid. So I've been really happy with this way of storing them. Okay, so we've talked about mills. We've talked a little bit about grains. There's a lot more to say about grains, but I'm just gonna leave it at that, keep it really simple for you and make sure this is not too long or overwhelming. The next would be to think about your mixer. And it is something that I have noticed when working with fresh milled flour is it really needs to be kneaded well in order to get a good rise. Obviously, people have been kneading fresh milled flour dough many, many years with their hands, and it is totally doable. However, I'm busy, I'm a mama of 4, we have a lot going on in our lives, and I just don't have the time for that. I wish I did sometimes, but I just don't. And so having an option to just throw everything in and have it be mixed and kneaded without my hands is it's a win-win. When I started out with fresh milled flour, I did use my KitchenAid mixer. It's right there on the counter. I still use it for a variety of needs. However, it took my dough so long and I was getting really frustrated, and also with the amount of bread that I am baking, it was just too much, that my KitchenAid was starting to get really hot, making really weird sounds and even smelling a little bit burnt. So I decided to borrow my mom's Bosch mixer. She's had it for my whole life. I'm super blessed to have a mom that has really valued eating healthy, and I've learned so much from her. So thanks, Mom. When I started with her Bosch, I noticed that what took my KitchenAid 45 minutes or something like that was about 6 to 9 minutes in the Bosch, and that was a huge time saver. And so after using it for quite a few months, I decided that it was time to invest in the new Bosch for our family, and it's been great, and I'm super happy with it. This one is the Universal Plus mixer in the stainless steel, and it has a 10-pound dough capacity, which is really big. If you get the white one, it has a 14-pound dough capacity, so a little bit more. It's just kind of what your preference is, what you want to have in your kitchen, either the stainless or the plastic one. And it also has a lot of different capabilities. You can have a blender, there's an ice cream maker, there's a spiralizer, there's all different kinds of attachments. Okay, so I forgot to get out the accessories because I wanted to show you what came with it when you buy it. When I bought it, there was a really good sale going on, and I purchased the stainless steel dough hook. It came with this dough hook, and it also comes with the plastic dough hook extender. I just appreciated that this was stainless steel and made of one piece of stainless steel. This one is aluminum, and I think this part is stainless steel. So that just was something that I was prioritizing in my kitchen, and I'm super glad I did it. It's been great. It also obviously has a lid. This would be the splash ring that it comes with. It's a great thing to have when you are mixing and putting in flour and you don't want it to go all over the place. It also comes with a whisker. There are quite a few mixers online that you can look through and do your own research and find out what fits your needs and fits your budget and your kitchen. The Bosch would be something that I would highly recommend. There's also the Ankerstrom, I think I'm saying that right, and then the Nutrimil Artiste. Those are really great ones. The Nutrimil Artiste is a bit smaller than the Bosch or the Ankerstrom, but also a really great option. Okay, so now that we've talked about the mill, the grain, and the mixer, let's talk about some of the extras that I have found really helpful in my kitchen. These are not necessities, but they are super helpful for the process and consistent results, which I think matter when working with fresh milled flour. The first thing that I would recommend is a food thermometer. You know that bread is done when its internal temperature has reached 190 to 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's hard to determine if you're just looking at the color of the crust. So having a thermometer to stick in the loaf makes it really easy to know that your bread is done, or maybe needs a couple more minutes. Stick it in again, you can get the right temperature and know that it's done. Another thing that I would highly recommend is a kitchen scale. When we mill our own grains here at home, it often comes out really light and airy. And so a cup of fresh milled flour is going to differ between a cup of all-purpose flour, or even if you let your fresh milled flour kind of sit for a little bit, it's going to kind of lose that air and become a little bit more denser. And so I find it really easy to use a kitchen scale and recipes that go by weight. It just produces really consistent results for you and takes away the confusion of, why is my dough so dry, or why is it so wet? I use the right amount of flour. So it's just nice to have a kitchen scale. I did get this when I purchased my Bosch, and I do really like it because it has measurement conversions on the top. It's just easy if you're trying to double or triple a recipe. It has all of those conversions on it, which I really like. Another thing about this scale that I like is it's really big. The Bosch mixer or a large bowl fits on top of it, and I can still see the weight. The next couple items would be a pizza roller. It's not just for pizza dough. I use this all the time when I'm working with dough. It just makes the process easy. I like how it feels in my hands. I'm not working with a huge rolling pin. The next thing would be a bench scraper. It's really helpful to use when cutting the dough. I use this to help scrape it off the counter when it's a little bit more of a stickier dough, plop it into my pan. I use it for cutting cinnamon rolls. These two things I just grab all the time. They're just the two things that I always need for my bread making day. The next thing that I would recommend would be these Cambro food storage containers. I use these for proofing my dough. And when you're starting out especially, you really don't want to mess with overproofing your dough. It's just gonna make the process a lot harder. And so having something with straight sides that you can put your dough in and you can really get a good picture of how much your dough has risen and you know exactly when it's done is super helpful. And these really make that process easy. I just put this rubber band on it so I don't even have to think about, wait, how much dough did I have in the beginning and where did I start out? I just put this on here. I know that's where I started out. I wait until it's doubled. It's been a really great thing. I would recommend the 4-liter and the 6-liter. The 6-liter is probably, this is a lot of dough. So if you're making smaller batches, probably stick with the 4-liter. If you're doing a lot, do the 6-liter. All right, so the next thing would be pans. That's kind of an obvious one, but I'm just gonna share real quick that this is one of my favorite pans. It's the Pullman loaf pan. This is a 2-pound loaf pan. I love this thing. It's so great. It makes really great bread. Super consistent results every time. Great size for my family for their sandwiches. And then you also just want some really good loaf pans. I have these stainless steel ones. They are really big. They're the 5x9 ones, but they work great for my family. So just find some really good loaf pans for yourself. The last thing that I would recommend are these bags that I use for proofing my dough in the pans. They make it really easy to see the dough. I like having something that is clear just because I can gauge it really well and know that it's risen enough and it's ready to go in the oven. But I also don't just want to use plastic wrap all the time, so just sticking it in these big 2.5-gallon bags make it really easy. I wash these and reuse them all the time. I also tried these elastic plastic bowl covers. It's kind of a mouthful, but they're really helpful too, just to stick over your loaf pan and get a good eye of where you're at. You can also just use a towel. If you do use a towel, I would recommend getting it wet in warm water and then putting it over your dough. I don't often use that just because I live in a really dry climate, and so it dries pretty quickly, and so I just find myself having to go back, re-wet the towel, put it back on, and I just like this process. It just makes it easy and one and done, and I'm not messing with a towel. Okay, I know that was a lot and probably not the most exciting video that you've watched today, so I apologize for that. Thanks for sticking around with me if you're still watching. I really appreciate that. I will link all the things that I've mentioned in the description box below so you can check them out if you're interested. I'm excited to take you along with me as I bake for my family and show you a little bit more of how we incorporate eating whole grains and what I bake with fresh milled flour. I'll bring you out in the garden and harvest some vegetables, and we'll make some meals together. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.